This is Andrew from FX Medicine. We thank you so much for your support over the last 2 years. We'd really love to remain clinically relevant to your practice. So if you know of an expert in some area, please let us know. You can contact us on fxmedicine.com.au, Facebook or Twitter. This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield-Cook. And joining me in the studio today is Sonya Reynolds. Sonya is a nutritionist with over 10 years industry experience. Throughout her career, Sonya has held many roles, including sales, customer service and practitioner education roles for one of Australia's largest nutraceutical supplement companies, all whilst running her own clinic called The Right Bite in Sydney's Inner West. Sonya has a strong interest in the areas of detoxification, gastrointestinal and digestive disorders, and in particular working with children with special health needs. A passion I believe is born of circumstance. As a busy mum of 2 beautiful young girls, Sonya has also been on a personal journey treating, researching and understanding the therapy options for epilepsy following the diagnosis of her eldest daughter, Imi. And today, Sonya is going to share these insights with you, our listeners. Welcome, Sonya, to FX Medicine.
Andrew.
So I think we need to begin with where you started as a nutritionist. Why? And then can I ask, how did you feel when, I guess there's this affront when we think we're doing everything right and then suddenly we have a child and there's an issue.
Yeah.
And how did you go with self-blame, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, wow. You've asked me a big one.
Yeah, let's jump.
Let's jump in. To answer the first part of the question, how did I get into the industry? I had a quarter-life crisis, as they like to say it, which I now know sounds very naive.
Is that where you get a VW Beetle?
Yeah, no. It's when you decide you want to become a natural health practitioner.
Yeah.
So I studied to become a nutritionist with a naturopathic point of view. And, I had all these dreams of what I was going to do and who I was going to treat. And I remember very specifically hearing about epilepsy when we were studying. And I thought, I don't even want to listen to that. I'm not going to get into that. That's too hard. It just sounded too hard. And I really, that memory became very crystal clear in my mind when my daughter got her diagnosis. It's just funny how life happens.
Yeah. Curveballs.
But that's okay. We can hit those. So basically Imogen was diagnosed at 3.5. So it's called a sudden onset epilepsy, and the night that it happened, she kept falling over all the time, and people think that epilepsy is a tonic-clonic, or what we used to call a grand mal, which is now called a tonic-clonic. But it's not. There's lots of different forms of epilepsy, like an absent seizure, one called a myoclonic drop, so your eyes literally go in the back of your head and you drop. So she was having those. But we were we'd never seen anything like that before. And then basically her eyes just kept flicking in her head and she'd come in and out of it. And I called the ambulance going, there's something happening to my baby. She's dying. Help me. And they turned up. We're so lucky that we live in close to a good hospital in Sydney, and they were there within 3 minutes. I wouldn't get off the phone because I said, she's dying in front of my eyes. Yeah. So no one knew what it was. That no one was saying it was epilepsy because it didn't look like classic epilepsy. And we still didn't think it was. And then it was over time that obviously we got an EEG and we did an MRI to make sure that she didn't have a brain malformation or something like that, or a cancer. And Yeah, I very much blame. Well, you potentially blame each other as well. Your partner, like, what did you do? Look at your genes. Look what look what your family
But it's reasonable.
did.
It's reasonable to do this, and
Yeah.
you know, resentment for, let's say, a partner who smokes,
Yeah,
and sudden infant death syndrome, for instance,
Yeah.
or other adverse issues.
Yeah.
So I think that's reasonable, and I think it's not talked about enough.
no, there's a lot of blame, and I think there's a lot of grief as well. And I think that's what surprised me, is how much grief you experience when your child's life doesn't look like the way that you thought it should look. And that's okay, but grief is it's like a wave and it comes and goes. And I think the longer that we've been on this journey, and I hate to say it that way, the less you grieve, the more you accept, and the less you blame, because it is what it is, and what's blame going to do anyway? It's not going to help you.
But I think, you know, that sort of blame or resentment, it is a valid thing. I didn't throw in the flip for that, and that is, let's say a male blaming their female partner for something like endo. It's no fault of the female, but it is also valid that the male has some resentment. How it's directed, however, that's the trick.
Yeah, and I think I think that's where couples may have, have issues with having a special needs child because of that blame. So perhaps that's where some of those more complicated and partners do break up in these situations. But I'm lucky enough to have continued my relationship with my husband.
So did anybody heed those issues when these arose? Anybody in the healthcare system?
I don't think anyone really talked us through that we were going to have shock. I think we were both in shock and disbelief. No one had epilepsy in our family. There was nothing that we could, I guess you think, oh, well, there's epilepsy in the family. Perhaps you're not as accepting, but it mightn't be a surprise. Like, it just seemed so wrong out there, just out of our realm, that I think shock, we probably weren't talked through enough that. But we were lucky. They did refer us to clinical psychologists, and personally, both my husband and I have seen clinical psychologists separately, and Tim's was very much dealing with the grief and anger and, like rage about how our daughter's life, because she does have learning difficulties and delays. And when she was very sick, she was very, very sick, non-verbal, back in nappies. So I think there was a lot of anger around those times particularly, or when times are particularly hard, and you do take it out on each other. So, we've very much
employed the expertise of clinical psychology.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad that they were offered you. I was sort of getting the feeling.
I'm paying for it myself. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't put on a silver platter.
Oh, really? It wasn't offered as part of hey, listen, this is going to be something that you're going to work through. You may need some help here. That's a really interesting thing, isn't it?
But, thankfully we can go to a GP and ask for a referral as part of a mental health care plan. So that's what we both did.
But you had to initiate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, good question.
A failing of the healthcare system that they don't take it. It's kind of like, there's the patient, I'm treating the patient. Everybody around them who is significant others can deal with their own sort of baggage.
Yeah, totally. And I think something I wanted to say to you was that we're talking about treating special needs children, but really my heart lies with special needs mums who need support, and not even special needs mums. Like, they usually carry more of the emotional load and
very often more of the physical load.
The physical load. So I think supporting these mums are really important. So I think that's a great question, because for me, part of my well-being is to see a clinical psychologist, to exercise a couple of times a week and eat well. And when I try and follow those parameters, I feel better and can better support my family and my children.
So let's delve into that. Yeah. You're a nutritionist. Let's talk about navigating medicine and nutrition in epilepsy.
Yeah, really hard. I think the first thing is that when you have a refractory epilepsy, that means that you're drug resistant, that 2 or more drugs haven't worked for you. So currently Imogen's on 3 anti-epileptic drugs.
Yeah.
And it's the side effects that you get that you need, that where naturopathy and nutrition really can come into play. For example, one of the drugs that she's on is called Keppra, and it's well known in the medical establishment that you get what's called Keppra rage. One of the reasons why I think you get this Keppra rage is because it depletes B6. So when you look, and it's very easy to find the evidence for it, is that it'll say, yep, Keppra depletes B6. So there's no wonder these little people are feeling rages if we think about how B6 works, as well as the other Bs as well. So for me, I think every anti-epileptic drug should be co-prescribed with a B vitamin, no question.
There's certain ones with folate,
myth.
like phenytoin sodium decreases folate, but there's a titration issue there as well, isn't there? Because folate also decreases phenytoin. So you have to balance both of them to get a therapeutic effect whilst maintaining the folic acid. I don't know about B6. I've heard of B6-dependent seizures.
Yes, there's also those. Yes. This is separate to that. It's just purely related to the
medication,
to the medication. Another medication is Lamictal, and basically it can cause you to have less of an appetite, and it can cause wakefulness. So if you're taking it at night, then you're going to be wakeful, and then you're taking all these other drugs like a benzodiazepine to
try and help you sleep. Polypharmacy, But
and it's
not
like
just that, is
slippery
that
slope.
You've got the flow-on effects of your carers as well. So the child is awake all night. The mother and the father, more likely the mother, is going to be then sleepless, sleep deprived, and that has flow-on effects to relationships, to housework, to work performance, to everything.
Everything. We had 5 years where she didn't sleep properly.
Wow.
Like not a full night's sleep, on and off, just a couple of nights and then a couple of nights. That wasn't related to the Lamictal. It was her epilepsy is rare because it's called ESES, and it's a continuous spike and wave in sleep. So you never go into that deep sleep. There's always those spikes. So it really, over time, I found what she needs to take to get that good sleep. But yeah, there was a long time where we didn't sleep, and it was really hard. That was probably the worst time. Now you have to explain
Emmy's condition.
Okay.
The proper explanation.
So it's called ESES.
ESES.
Yeah. Basically, it's a continuous spike and wave. So to a layperson, the spikes are just continuous. It's very aggressive. It's rare, but it's subclinical. So when your child's first diagnosed, for example, with us, we didn't know she had this, but it would have been there. So initially she was diagnosed, and then when she started having language regression and behaviour regression, amongst other things, then they say, okay, let's do a sleep-deprived EEG. So you have to keep your kid up all night, take them in, get them to fall asleep, do the EEG, which gives them a seizure as well. So you've got a seizing child, keeping them up all night, and then you run this sleep-deprived EEG, and it showed that most of her brain activity was epileptic, but you didn't know that because it's subclinical. So you don't see it until they go to the EEG.
So ESES is electrical status epilepticus, in sleep.
In sleep, yeah.
Jeepers, you'd become an expert of acronyms, wouldn't you?
Yes. So when you said explain ESES, I decided that I wasn't going to say that.
Well, I just did.
Yeah, thank you.
So B6 worked in helping her get better sleep from the medications?
No. It helped with, good question. Obviously it would have, because of the neurotransmitters, that it would have helped support. But it's more about that mood and behaviour. Right. That's what it was
So it decreases the rage.
Yeah. Epilem, for example, is really well known for aggression and behaviour, and we had Imogen on that initially, and it was probably the worst 6 months of our life. And we kept saying, this isn't our child. Like, this isn't right.
Wow.
Something's wrong. And they kept saying, no, well, you weigh it up. It's either seizures, because she also had the daytime seizures as well as the ESES. So it's your choice. You either have seizures or you have behaviour. And in the end, I just put my foot down and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And we were seeing a child psychologist at this stage to help us with her behaviour. And they said, okay, well, you can try Lamictal. So we titrated down and up. And in that time, you can get something called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which is the rash, the full body rash.
Yep.
So we had to be really cautious of that. But the change between my child on Epilum to my child on Lamictal is night and day. And so I really push for people to get off Epilum, basically, because it was awful.
But it's their neurologist that will be in control.
Yeah, look, it's that old school, first line is Epilum usually as part of their treatment.
Have you looked into other therapeutic options?
Currently, we're looking at the special access scheme for medical cannabis. Unfortunately, the process is very difficult and very expensive.
And to me, it's rather a setup. It's rather a placation by politicians. Yes, you can get it, but no, you can't in the end anyway.
Yeah. So you can go for a special access scheme, which is if you're really
in need.
In need, yeah. If you've got a refractory epilepsy, for example.
This is for the Australian healthcare system, I might add, to our listeners, by the way.
But when you have to find a doctor that is willing to prescribe it. Because
and then
it's so.
What is the education of those doctors? Who's educating them to choose the various cannabis product?
Yeah. Usually the patient is expected, or what I've been doing is, and I'm lucky that I'm in the profession that we're in because I have taught myself. So I've gone and contacted the different businesses that have been approved by the TGA on the special access scheme. Then I've looked at the ingredients and then I've based my decision on that, then taken it to the doctor. But that's a lot of pressure on a parent to teach themselves and educate themselves and then have the doctor to go ahead with it. But our doctor was very cautious about us using it because of the cost. It would cost about $1,000 a month to treat my daughter with one of the cannabis products that's available in New South Wales at the moment. Yeah. So I've got to I've got to find a nice benefactor once I get
Move to
approval.
Colorado.
I know. I've had that
conversation.
Seattle.
So on a serious note though, diet.
Yeah.
Dietary intervention. Now, ketogenic diet has been employed for certain forms of epilepsy.
Yes.
How did you employ it? How well did it work? And did you run into any issues using it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the ketogenic diet is usually used as a last resort. The reason being is it's so hard. Ketogenic diets are very trendy right now, which is great, but the ketogenic diet that we're talking about is not the same.
No.
It's very specific. It's 4 parts fat to 1 part carbohydrate and protein. You measure everything. Every meal is to this ratio and you have to create a meal on a spreadsheet.
Right.
So you don't just go, oh, that looks like 4 parts.
That looks fun.
That looks good. You're using it like it's a drug. And for that reason, it's the last resort. Yeah. So basically we had, Imogen had epilepsy for just over a year. And she was regressing further and further and none of the drugs were working, basically. She was having daily seizures. The seizures were changing. We were getting everything from myoclonic to tonic-clonics. It just changed all the time. She became, so as you may or may not know, there's damage to the brain every time you have a seizure. And she's got these continuous seizures in her sleep. So she became nonverbal, drooling, back in nappies right before she was going to school. I look back now and I seem very naive, but I was quite determined to get her to start school and go to a mainstream school and get full funding. So looking back now, it's crazy, but the only way I was going to get my child functioning was on a keto diet. So we were enlisted in the hospital and we did the strict ketogenic diet for 6 months and we were able to get her to school and we were able to get her functioning out of nappies.
Wow.
She was still very low vocabulary, but she was functioning. The better she got, the more she rejected the food. But you can imagine that it's not that palatable. If you think about that much fat, you're thinking about a tiny bit of protein and huge amounts of fat. And the nutritionist in me was like, I just don't think that's enough protein. And within that time, guess what? Chunks of hair were falling out of her head. And, you know, for me, it was a real protein deficiency. And I got further educated, as you do, and I found the modified Atkins diet for epilepsy. So basically it's unlimited fat, unlimited protein, and limited carbs. So it's much more palatable, adaptive. You don't have to put everything on the scale. You know, I pretty much had to stop working within the time that we were on the ketogenic diet because it was all consuming.
Do you think that it was required to have Emmy on that strict ketogenic diet in the interim stages, in the initial stages?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I debated that with the neurologist actually, whether we needed to have done the keto diet to get her to the place where she was, because obviously she was so sick. And he said, I used that diet because I knew it would work quickly and most efficiently. Because in my mind, you're turning off a lot of people from this diet doing this. I think it's old-fashioned. I would be inclined, and if this was my patient, is I'd say start on the modified Atkins diet, see if you get some seizure reduction, and then you can add things like MCT oils, which is a medium chain triglyceride.
It's okay.
Triglyceride, which is used like a carbohydrate. So it's really important when you're on a restricted carbohydrate diet that you are getting the energy from somewhere else. And that's why these kids are really lethargic. So for me, a key inclusion, which they don't always do, is that they need to have MCT. And the reason they don't include it is because it can give you diarrhea. Yeah, it can, if you go really high dose really quickly. So start low and titrate up. So really small tweaks I think could be made to make it less scary and less hard. But it is difficult. Going to kids' parties. When have you seen a carb-free kids' party? Nightmare.
No.
I used to make ketogenic cakes. Yay, come to my party. And the kids would be like, meh. And the adults are like, oh, I quite like it.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, the parents I think, they were being kind as well, perhaps. But, we're lucky that we're actually in this day and age where coconut oil is easily accessible, coconut flour, what else? Stevia, things like that you can use as a sweetener. So I think it's easier now to do the ketogenic diet or modified Atkins diet than ever before. But for me, I think they really need to look at the diet that they're promoting in the hospital because they're telling you to use margarine and loads of dairy, and I just think there's better nutritious ways to up the fat content in a diet.
And was it your neurologist who was supportive of the ketogenic diet?
Yeah, because we had done everything else. So we'd done intravenous immunoglobulins, that hadn't worked. We'd done over 4 drugs. She was not, So it's like the last resort. And he was very supportive.
You know what's really interesting is that I was speaking with a GP who was talking to, it was a dietitian who was talking to neurologists. Attending a neurology seminar, and this dietitian was speaking to them about the inclusion or the employment of the ketogenic diet, and they were saying, no, we couldn't be bothered with that because it was too hard.
I can see where they're coming from because it's out of their...
So refer.
Yeah.
Refer to somebody that's expert in that.
So they will work very closely with the dietitian, and we did. But it is scary, and a lot of parents are scared of it because it is a lot of work. And that's why my suggestion is, rather than going straight into the ketogenic diet, why not try a modified Atkins diet? And when I went looking for the evidence, there actually is evidence that if you, when someone's first diagnosed with epilepsy, to check for allergies like dairy and gluten,
Right. Yep.
and if you remove them, specifically gluten, you should see a reduction in seizures.
Right.
So looking at gluten-free, dairy-free, low allergen, type anti-inflammatory
And
meals.
then the keto if need be.
Yeah. So there are other things that you can do. And if you really look, which I have, there is evidence for it. But sometimes you don't need evidence. You should just try it and see how your kid feels. That's my opinion.
So just going back to cannabis, that you're looking into and you've delved into the research.
Yeah.
I get that we're not there yet in Australia. And we'll talk about the association that I think we should be supporting, and that is United in Compassion. So,
yeah.
from your research, what kind of cannabis is applicable for epileptic treatment? There's,
As in CBD.
zillions on the market.
Yeah.
So it's CBD you're talking about
CBD.
specifically, and are you talking about in exclusion of THC?
Justin Sinclair has spoken so eloquently on FX Medicine, and I've listened to his podcast, and it's about using the whole plant because there is that entourage effect. And what I find interesting is in the Epidiolex trial, which was on Dravet syndrome, which is a very aggressive epilepsy, there was over 79% of respondents had adverse events. So I wonder if they'd had a whole plant that had the modulating effects of that trace amounts of THC, if they would have had as large adverse events.
Yeah.
So I think that's something I'm really interested in, and I know United in Compassion's interested in that as well.
Okay, so not to slang off about Epidiolex too much, it had some benefit, right?
Yeah, look, they did see a 30% reduction in seizures, so there's definitely a place for Epidiolex, no question. But for me, I would really like access to a whole plant.
So what other things, let's say the legal things that are available in Australia, what things did you employ that were of use to Emmy's therapy, indeed her progression? And can I ask a point about what things did you find of no value or indeed might have had a reversed impact on Emmy's progression?
For me, what really affected Imogen and her regression was the polypharma, the multiple drugs and their side effects.
Yeah.
And navigating that and
Chasing a
removing them,
tail.
working out which drug is doing what was really difficult. And what I found frustrating was no one wanted to admit that it was the drug causing the side effect. It was something else. So that for me is really disappointing, and I've had to really push, like I said, to remove the Epilum because I knew it wasn't my child. I knew it was drug related. So I think managing polypharma is very difficult. So what I had to do was find nutrients that wouldn't interact with the drug, like as you said with phenytoin. She's not on that, but as an example. But also we're going to help support her epilepsy. So really easy one, magnesium. They've shown that magnesium is lower in epileptic patients. This is easily accessible as well in evidence. I'm not just making this up. Yeah. Personally, what I found was when she was not on magnesium, her muscles were very tight. Like her little arm was just all seized in a sense.
Yep.
So now I use a really good dose. I use 300 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium.
And what age is she?
She is nearly 9.
Nearly 9 now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I find that dose is really helpful. I also put magnesium flakes in her bath every night, which has benefits for her little sister as well.
Okay.
And I like that, it's that transdermal absorption as well. I have her on an activated B now. So activated Bs only really became available in Australia very recently. And I've noticed a huge difference. The point that people are saying, wow, what have you given Imogen that she's speaking so clearly and able to communicate? Because she is still very delayed.
Yeah.
So
But cute as a button, I got to
so
say.
cute. Mostly.
Mostly.
And the activated Bs really made a difference. And I would suggest that's to do with methylation and detoxification. Omega-3s, I use a really potent EPA, 500 milligram per capsule and over 250 milligrams of DHA.
Now, you use a capsule, 9-year-old, no problems?
So
They're rather big.
we've taught her to swallow capsules, Andrew.
Okay, all right, yeah.
We started with lollies. I know, forgive the nutritionist. It was only a day or two.
But there are some
and then
nice flavoured liquids out there now.
Yeah, that's true. But I just like the convenience of being able to put the capsule in her mouth. And it's because we're doing medicine 3 times a day, whatever I can do to make my life easier, that's what I'm going to choose. So it's not as potent as, say, liquid fish oil, you're right, but I think it's compliance and ease of administration works every time with children. So, look, for other children that can't swallow capsules, then you would do a liquid. But what they've found is that if your omega-3 status is at a good level, then you'll get a better result from your B vitamins. So you get a better response from your B vitamins. So I think that's really important for someone like Imogen who potentially has that replication issue, that they're getting the full effects of the B vitamins. And then lastly, one of the ingredients that I love as well and that I've been trying to take for my mental health is L-theanine or theanine. And that's because it takes you into that alpha brainwave state.
Yeah.
So I found giving her theanine and magnesium before bed really helps calm her down. And then I also like to use probiotics.
Yeah.
I don't need to sell you on the gut-brain connection, do I? No. Tick. So,
But there's so much more coming out about, this brain-gut interaction.
GALT.
Who's the controller of which?
Yeah, that's right. So I think that's where the whole dietary-related information comes into it as well, because you want to take out what's potentially causing dysbiosis and a leaky gut and inflammation as well.
You spoke about the interaction of the nutrients with regards to allaying side effects of medications. Where did you look for those? Were they readily found on MIMS, or did you use, like for instance, one of my favourites is Yvonne Coleman, the Nutrition Consultants Australia book. It's like a folder. It's as thick as your arm.
I haven't seen it.
She's incredible.
I want it.
And she's incredible. She does this. She basically attacks various pharmaceutical classes each year and says, right, what's the data on, albumin binding, on transference, on direct nutrient
That's amazing.
deficiencies caused by the medications.
Yeah.
Common ones, for instance,
I
is
think I was
OCP.
reading her this morning. Someone sent a link out. So, yeah.
Okay.
Funny.
So Nutrition Consultants Australia will put that up on our FX Medicine website for a resource for people to link in, and they can buy that folder.
Yeah.
It is so valuable when you're teasing out drug-nutrient interactions.
Yeah, that's
how they play a
great.
part.
Look, I use a couple of resources when I'm looking at drug-nutrient interactions. I go to PubMed.
Yep.
I know.
Yeah.
Go to the source. Yeah. So I'll go there, and that's why I'll say sometimes, the evidence is very easily found. Like you go to PubMed and put in magnesium and epilepsy. So, going to the research that way, I use some resources books like Henry Ozeki.
Yep.
He's got a great nutrient Bible, and I look at
And it really is a nutrient Bible.
Yeah.
And has been that for decades.
Forever, yeah. And, I use I Am Gateway as well.
Yeah.
So I'll look around wherever I can.
Sonya, just to wrap up, you've seen major changes, advances in Imogen's behaviour, in her learning, her speech, her activity. What's the acceptance been by the medical team of your using nutritional interventions, and how has that changed once they've seen these benefits take place?
It's complicated. They know what I do and they'll say, okay, here's the supplement I want you to take. And I'll go, okay, I actually want to take this supplement. Is that okay? And they go, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, this is better. And they go, okay. So then
it's got to do with their knowledge.
Yeah. And that's fine. People think that certain brands are really great. They don't have my qualifications and my knowledge. But I really wish that neurologists would co-prescribe a good multivitamin with good Bs to every single child that is on an anti-epileptic drug. I just think there's so many benefits and there's very little cost to help enhance their quality of life. I do tell them all our supplements. There isn't a lot of engagement, unfortunately.
Right.
They let me do my thing.
But it's your thing.
It's my thing.
Right.
Yeah, but
Can
we
they
have a
not
great
see?
Relationship with our neurologist. He's a great man.
Great.
We do. But he lets me do my thing on my side and he'll just leave me to it.
Wow.
Unfortunately. But, one day I would love to be the person there, training neurologists saying this is what you could do, these simple tweaks to change these kids' lives.
Well, we look forward to that day, certainly. Sonya, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
For giving us not just your expertise, but your care of your beautiful daughter. You are got to be one of the most fabulous mums on this earth.
Oh, thank you.
And well done for your perseverance. And indeed, I wish you luck, and I do wish you good fortune in the future trying to access the cannabis that you want so desperately for Amy's benefit.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. If you're loving our FX Medicine podcasts, please don't forget to share us with your colleagues, family and friends.